Run, hide, fight. That is what millions of students across the United States are told every year. We are taught to hide behind desks, close the blinds, use classroom furniture as a shield, and to be as quiet and as small as possible. Students learn to be afraid, to be nervous and scared of going to school each and every day. After practicing these drills tens of times throughout my times in schools, I've become conditioned to no longer view schools as a safe haven, but instead as a dangerous and unpredictable place. But it wasn't always like that. Just a few decades ago, in my parents' generation, all they had to worry about was earthquakes and fire drills, natural disasters we have no control over. Now, we practice these active shooting and lockdown drills every year, fighting against violent perpetrators that could have been very well prevented. This contrast highlights a terrifying truth. The crisis of school violence is not static. It's escalating, creeping up year by year, and taking the lives of over 20 students in 2025. As shown in this graph, since the tragedy of the 1999 Columbine High School massacre, this risk has only become significantly higher each year. This increasing statistic proves that our current strategies and frameworks for thinking about school violence are epically failing and reveals a concerning trajectory of growing violence in our schools. To truly, and most importantly, effectively prevent future tragedy, we must stop being paralyzed by the two polarized and binary arguments: guns or mental illness. We must address the true hidden systemic driver, the epidemic of social isolation. The first common argument fixates on the matter of gun availability. While insufficient policies that allow gun purchases to go unchecked is undoubtedly a factor that amplifies violence and increases the potential of gun violence, this argument implies that if we could just implement the right policy, having stricter regulations or even banning guns from everyone, that the violence would stop. The truth is that even if we did get rid of all guns, the systemic issues that drive people to these thoughts of violence would still prevail, and other methods of violence without the use of guns would continue to happen. The blaming the gun argument is not enough, as it offers a shallow analysis of the physical weapon and not the human mind behind it. Equally insufficient is the counter-argument that these events are simply the result of a nationwide mental health crisis. While it is true that those who perpetrate violence are not mentally well, clinical data consistently shows that only a small percentage of crimes can be fully attributed to mental illness. In fact, quite the opposite is true. People with mental illness are far more likely to be victims of violence as opposed to perpetrators. Let that sink in. By using mental illness as a quick scapegoat, we not only discourage people from seeking the critical help they need, but also distract attention from the systemic factors that actually shape violence risk. Instead of working to help reform the systems in place that provide a breeding ground for these factors, we can't just continue to blame people that are products of the system. To find a path forward, we must look past these one-sided reasonings and examine the detailed backgrounds of these events. The hidden piece that we've been missing, which is present in nearly every school tragedy, is loneliness, rejection, and isolation. The profile of a person who commits a tragic act is often rooted in the experience of being bullied, feeling invisible, and believing that they have no power or community. This leads them to turn to extreme measures like committing a school shootings in an attempt to bring attention, come out of their invisibility, and reclaim their own power. Before we look at past examples of school violence perpetrators, I want to introduce to you a concept of the concentric circles of kinship or community, a strategic framework for thinking about social relationships and their impact on health. In the diagram above, you can see the concentric circles, starting from the center with yourself, moving outwards towards friends and family, and eventually reaching the greater community level. Since humans are social creatures, the entirety of our life and social efforts are focused on increasing the amount of people in each ring and the quality of relationships to yourself. Before diving in, let's all take a moment. When you consider these concentric circles, who are in each of your circles? Starting with family, moving out towards friends, then towards your greater community. Imagine their faces. These are your circles of support. Having a large community of people that care, support, and listen to you makes it exponentially easier to go through difficult times. Now, when we look at cases of past school shooters, I want you to think about their actions and behaviors in the context of this concentric circle model. The two students involved in the 1999 Columbine tragedy offer a textbook example of the corrosive effects of social isolation. The shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were a product of a systematic failure to recognize and intervene in social support. In interviews with fellow peers, many indicated that Eric and Dylan were considered loners who no one really cared about. They reportedly faced significant bullying and teasing from peers, and the subsequent attack was partially seen as a protest against their bullies, popular cliques, and students they felt had hurt them. As a result of the dramatic shrinking of their circles of kinship, caused by a combination of bullying and growing resentment towards others, they are forced to seek support from each other. They are essentially marginalized in the school community and rejected from mainstream school life. This isolation likely contributed to an insular world where they reinforce each other's complaints and potentially violent ideations. This marks a process that became a breeding ground for their violent plans towards the school later on. Similarly, Nicholas Cruz, the shooter in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, exhibited significant signs of social isolation throughout his entire life. Like Eric and Dylan, Nicholas was also widely described as a loner who struggled with simple social interactions. From a young age, he displayed aggressive behaviors that pushed other children away and also contributed to him being frequently bullied and teased. His entire understanding of the world and identity was shaped by feeling like an outcast. In the years leading up to the shooting, his behavior worsened and he became more isolated, often going days at a time without a social interaction. Similarly, in Cruz's case, his circle became continuously smaller, losing his peer and friend circle and therefore losing possible support. His disciplinary issues resulting from his violent behaviors eventually led from his expulsion from school activities, severing the few remaining connections that he had. Even worse, the death of his adoptive mother, a few months before the shooting, was a major triggering event that amplified his depressions and feelings of loneliness. At this point, he had completely lost every circle and was left alone with no support. The combination of personal grief and trauma, in addition to a lack of support from the community, eventually led to an extreme outburst in behavior in the form of his attack on the school, which is often seen as revenge for the sufferings he experienced there. Now, in order to rebuild the structure of our community, we must shift from protecting our schools through law enforcement by strengthening them by building social infrastructure. We need to provide support on a societal level by investing in proactive programs that create healthy community spaces and foster belonging. The preventative measures, like advisory clubs, affinity groups, arts programs, and social counseling, are often the first to go away during budget cuts. And contrary to popular belief, these programs aren't just for fun and are absolutely not optional. They are part of an essential infrastructure that uplifts overall mental health and feeling of belonging in a community space, which we know effectively prevents shootings. By establishing supportive programs, we can create reliable pathways to identify people who are in crisis and intervene socially before a school shooting happens. While ultimately, the institutional changes of building preventative social programs and working to rebuild the societal pillars of support is crucial, the shift begins with our own actions in our own circles of community. To stop the cycle of isolation, we must actively combat loneliness that we see in our daily lives. I encourage you to first find your own sense of belonging, whether that's through a club, a sport, or an interest group. This first step allows you to expand beyond the self circle into friends and peer circles. It is then you gain the confidence and the ability to be able to continue to expand these circles to the greater community. To summarize, the greatest individual contribution we can make is to look for the person who is not yet included. So the next time you're at school, at work, or sitting on the bus, and you see someone sitting alone, reach out. Invite them into a conversation. That small act of inclusion is the most powerful and immediate social help that we as individuals can give. By focusing our efforts on fighting the hidden epidemic of loneliness, we can begin to change the world and give the gift of companionship to everyone, ensuring that the next generation can return to only worrying about fire drills instead of hiding from the unthinkable school shooting. Thank you.